Hi, I'm Dr. Brennan Roach, and this is a virtual tour of the Holy Land. And today we are going to go to Megiddo, which is a very challenging, exciting place. A lot of you know that as Armageddon out of the book of Revelation. So we're going to challenge some ideas. We're going to tell the truth. We're not going to make up stories, and we're going to give it the way it is. So this is a virtual tour of the Holy Land. I'm Dr. Brennan Roach. And today, we are going to be looking at the oldest version of the Bible, at a little palace where he could stop overnight. Whoever interprets the dream has incredible power. If you're going from Jerusalem to Jericho or vice versa, you stop somewhere here and rest overnight. Near the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This is actually a pagan type place. It's a very likely place where Peter preached his first sermon. Some very significant, important events happen at this location. Hi, Megiddo is one of my favorite places that I've been to. There's so much to see. It's a great archaeological site. It's been built on, destroyed, built on, destroyed, built on, destroyed. And what that means for an archaeologist, a biblical archaeologist like myself, is there is a huge amount of information there. There's so much to see. There's so much information. We're going to be having a look at that, and we're going to be talking about some of the Christian ideas around Megiddo. And as I've already said in our lessons so far today, that Megiddo is known in the book of Revelation as Armageddon, or on the Hebrew, it is Ha-Megiddo. And that gets changed in the English to Armageddon, or Ha-Megiddo, Megiddo, Ha-Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo, the mountain of Megiddo. And so we're going to have a look, and let's pop up our PowerPoint slide and start to have a look at some of the images and see what we've got here today. So after the destruction, after the encounters of Elijah and the prophets of Baal, we now move down to Megiddo. Megiddo was, remember what a tell was, and we'll see a great example of this, which we'll talk about. Civilization or city built on top of one another, built on top of one another, built on top of one another. So Elijah calls down fire on the prophets of Baal. We talked about that last week. And now we move further south into a place called Megiddo, which was an ancient battleground for Israel, for the Holy Land, for Canaan, for the Egyptians. It doesn't matter for the Greeks, for the Romans, for the Assyrians, for the Persians. Whoever was in control of this section of land needed to control Megiddo, which is why it holds such an important place within Revelation, such an important place within prophecy and scripture, because Megiddo is that place of a battlefield, but we're going to look at it from the aspect of a spiritual battlefield tonight. So let's move straight in to our PowerPoint slide, and let's have a little bit of a look at what we're going to be going through tonight. Even as recently as World War I, it was still a battlefield. So I'm an Australian. A friend of mine, Tex, is a Anzac historian, and it's well known that the Anzacs, or the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, came through this region of Israel, and they needed to control it even during modern times. However, the story of Revelation takes place at Megiddo and puts Megiddo back in focus, even in the end times, even though it was abandoned long before the New Testament time of Jesus. So let's have a look at Megiddo. You can see it's sort of, if you have a look, and we'll see from a few of the other pictures, you can see from this aerial shot, it's quite a relatively small but tight city location. But have a look how steep. Have a look at the steep, and you can see here, sort of in the middle of the slide, at about, if you imagine about 7 o'clock on a clock hand, you can see what looks like a deep scar or gouge. Well, that's how far and how deep this city went. And the first major excavators came in and they dug through there to try and get an idea of what was in each level. And so it's quite a fascinating and amazing place. And it is really one of the richest locations that can be studied in archaeology. So let's have a look. Let's review what we've done so far in this season. We started out at Caesarea Philippi, the place of the source of where the water was coming from, the place of blessing. Then we went up Mount Hermon, which was a place of transformation, or the place of the transfiguration. We came back down the mountain and we went very short distance to Tel Dan, the place of control. And we saw how the temple was used to control people in the Old Testament times. And then we went to the city gate, which we found out was a place of meeting, and the importance of the gates. And we're going to look at some gates again tonight. It just, once you start to see it, it's everywhere, and how important the city gates are. Then we went to Tel Hatzor, a little bit further south, the place of unimaginable blessing, of how God moved in this in unimaginable ways with a series of miracles that just blessed the people of God. And in our last lesson, we went to Mount Carmel, the place of fire, where Elijah called down fire and completely obliterated the prophets of Baal and the gods of the Asherah. Today, we're going to tell Megiddo, which I am calling the place of destruction. So where are we? We can see those places that we talked about on the map. We can see right up north, and we started in Caesarea Philippi, went up Mount Hermon, and then started to travel south down Tel Dan at the beginning of the Jordan River, Hatzor, another major city, out to the sea, coastal area of Mount Carmel, and now we've come a little bit further down, and now we're past the Sea of Galilee, but we're still in a very fertile region of Israel, which is becomes incredibly important when we want to understand what's actually occurring here. So, where are we? Let's have a look at this magnificent site and some of the beautiful things. By the way, live today. So if you want to chat, if you want to talk about some things at the end, I'm going to log off and the lesson officially. But if you want to hang around to the end, more than happy to answer your questions live. We're doing it. I'm filling in for Dr. John today. So I'm doing mine live for you right now. So Tel Megiddo is situated in northern Israel and the north and the southwestern edge of the Jezreel Valley. It controls a pass that leads through Mount Carmel and thus is of considerable strategic importance. Major battles have been fought over the land bridge between Africa and Europe and Africa and Asia, and every single world empire needed to control this stretch of land. This is why every regional power, modern and ancient, all controlled Megiddo, destroyed it, took it over, and rebuilt it in order to control the area and the region. It is also the reason why Megiddo is mentioned in the book of Revelation. Now, book of Revelation cannot explain the importance of the book of Revelation in the few moments that I have here, but it's an incredibly important and powerful prophetic book. So it can be viewed through many different lenses. And I think the importance of Megiddo or Armageddon is because of the constant ongoing idea of control and battle for control that was constantly. And this is what Megiddo is more than any other city in ancient Israel. It is the city that symbolizes the battle of spiritual control. So let's have a mention of that. Let's look at that and understand that when we read about Armageddon, what it's actually talking about is a spiritual battle place. Now, I'll let others who are experts on the book of Revelation talk about whether it's literal, whether it's prophetic, whether it's future, whether it's past, whether it's all those sort of things. And we'll come back. I've got my ideas. Love to talk to you at the end in the chat about that. If you're into the book of Revelation, you're trying to figure out what some of those things mean. So it's about power, economics, and control linked to spiritual forces. So it's very important that you understand this is a spiritual battlefield first, and then a physical battlefield second. Okay, so when are we? A total of 20 cities were built on Megiddo. I've jumped a little bit ahead of myself in the text here. Let's just have a look at a few of the photos that I've got up. Now, if you have a look at this, See, and I'm going to show you a couple of photos. You will see that the green tinge, and you can see the brown sort of land there. This is agricultural rich farming land again. But more importantly than that, just have a look how far you can see. You can see to the mountain ranges in every single direction. So this became a critically important city for as an invading army came in, or even small disputes and things like that. It was a chariot city, and we'll talk more about that later. But have a look how quickly the lookouts and the watch guards could look across these plains, and if there was any problems, they could respond very, very quickly, because Tel Megiddo is not very high, but it's up high enough that it gives them a wonderful line of sight for tens of kilometers all the way across this region. And the natural mountain range is squeezing people. If no matter whether you're ancient or modern, you want to walk the easiest way, right? So you walk in the valleys. You don't walk across the tops of mountains. You walk in the valleys, and whether you've got large armies, your family on your own, or you're trading, you come through these paths rather than going over narrow mountain passes or ranges. So that's sort of where we are. This here we have a look at the Megiddo entrance. This is the modern entrance, and this is one of the places that's been really done. And I was having a look at some photos and videos today in preparation, and they're just constantly improving this site. You can see here this is a sort of more modern photo that I've found, and now they've even got wheelchair or disabled access going up into this site. This concrete made path. Before, when I was last time there, this was all dirt and stone paths, and you were able to go up there. It was really well presented. The visitors building has lots of great information, and they've even got some cool little graphics, which I'll show you a little bit later in the video that I'm about to show you. That date palms that you'll see there, date palms do not grow naturally in Israel. So the story is an interesting one around Megiddo when they were excavating this site, because it was a large site. So they brought in some foreign laborers, and the laborers would be eating dates. That was their native food, and they just throw them around the site. And they've let those date trees just grow and flourish. So you'll see lots of date trees. If you're wondering why we've got date trees on this site and nothing else, for whatever reason, they just decided to let the date trees grow there, and it gives a little bit of an interesting twist that we have here. We've got the Megiddo Temple. Now, you can see how far down they've dug to get to this temple site, to get to this temple location. Hopefully you can see it there. Sort of down towards the bottom middle, there's a round plateau of rocks. Can you see those sort of sort of small, unshapen rocks that have been put together in a circular sort of shape down the bottom? This is really important. And a flat top there. So this was the original cultic temple site. So we're going to have a look at this a little bit later, and we'll come back to it. But remember this picture, remember this image. And one of the interesting things that we find here is that every single time they built on top, another cultic temple or religious site was built one on top of another, one on top of another, one on top of another. You cannot, and it shows the principle that you cannot leave a spiritual cultic site empty, okay? You must control the site. So because it's a spiritual battle. So your God comes in when you defeat, it's actually your God has defeated the local God. So therefore, you don't just remove, and it's this very Western modern, we just get rid of everything, clean it away. What they do is you build on top of that site, and that means that you're taking spiritual control over that site. So that's really important for us to understand that with the temple here at Megiddo. Here's another slightly elevated image from a different angle, and you can see there that temple. And it's quite big. Certainly several people could be up there, and you can see in this angle, you can see some steps that would lead people up onto that site, and some walls and some that would be there and surrounding the actual altar. This was the sacrificial area of the temple itself. For those of you who were with us when we were at Hatzor, you might recognize this. Hatzor's a much better, more complete location in this sense, but this is the Megiddo stables. Now, if you remember our teaching from Hatzor, there was 3 locations. There was Megiddo and there was Hatzor as well, where there was different strategic locations where they would build these chariot stables, and we'll have a look at that. And this one's interesting because, and we'll see it in the video that I'm about to show you. The bigger sort of the lower, sort of more rectangular shape that are hollowed out, they're hollowed out because they were feeding troughs for the horses. Also, it's said at one particular time there was 450 chariots. So that means 900 horses. They're actually stabled here. Now, this is way too small for 450 chariots, but this is probably the chariot location of whoever the royal of King Solomon was at this particular point in time during the Israelite kingdom. So it was him who was the one who was actually controlling. So there would have been an area somewhere, and they haven't excavated down lower because there's just so much to excavate in Israel. So they haven't bothered to go find where these other stables would have been, but they would have been down a little bit there and probably protected with its own walls and things like that, so they could get out of the city very, very quickly. You're not going to have a inside the city wall 450 chariots. You're going to have a couple for the king, for the ruler, so he can move and get around quickly, but the rest are going to be with the soldiers in an encampment somewhere. So this is the Megiddo stables. Quite interesting. We'll have a look. This is the Megiddo storehouse. It's I hope you can get some sort of perspective. I suppose a great way to get a perspective on the storehouse here is if I want to sort of trace around. But you can't see me pointing at the picture here, can you? So sort of you can see that sort of darker line, and if you look closely, it sort of starts from the top left-hand corner, and it sort of goes along the top, then curves its way down to around about the bottom of the picture, around about 5 o'clock, and it's sort of like a darkish shadow. Those are actually steps going in a spiral pattern. So each one of those steps is like a sort of natural step height. So that'll give you some sort of idea about how big this actual storehouse was. And it was full of grain. So the steps were there. It would be filled up with grain from the surrounding regions. So it could withstand a, a siege for a long, long time, potentially years with the amount of grain that could be stored inside this. And we'll have a look at the water area as well in just a moment, which is just right now. And this is the tunnel that leads from the city underground to the actual water spring and the water supply. So that's maybe 150 meters, 150 meters, something like that. It's quite a long area. There's a little bit of water left at the other end now, but you imagine during the Old Testament times when this was a major city, would have been enough water flowing through these springs. The whole water table in Israel's dropped significantly because of just less rainfall and general change in the climate over the last thousands of years, not just the last 10 years, over thousands of years. And that has caused these water areas to still be there, but they've significantly dried up. So it's not even really worth showing you a picture of that. But that gives you some idea of the length of the tunnel and the engineering that was involved for them to actually control the land and what was actually occurring here. So with the water, with the food, with the fortifications, this was an incredibly well defended city that could last literally for years under a siege attack and was very difficult to take. But it was taken over and over and over again because it was so strategically important. You couldn't leave Megiddo uncontrolled. So when are we? This is literally covering 5,000 years of biblical history. There's incidents in different places, but it just goes on and on and on. So we're covering the whole stretch, particularly of the Old Testament, and carrying and moving forward in that period and time. So let's before we actually go on to have a look at what actually happened here, let's start to move into our video, and let's actually have a look at our video presentation from in the actual thing, and hopefully that gives you a really good idea of what happened. So what actually, or what it looks like rather. So what happened here? There are two things of importance that happened and can be found at Megiddo. The first is the pagan altar, and we talked a little bit about the pagan altar already. And the second is the chariot station, which was established during the time of King Solomon. So those are two incredibly important things and different lessons that we can learn. So let's go and have a look at the cultic temples at Megiddo. The important archaeological finds of the cultic temple was that one of the most important archaeological, it was a very early one as well, one of the important archaeological finds in Megiddo was a series of temples built on the same location inside the city walls. Now, this demonstrates a really important idea, and that is that the destruction of these temples in the ancient world was seen to be the destruction of a rival god. Now, of course, that would even be as different empires conquered one another. But what we're worried about, or what we're concerned with, is that we understand that what's happening here is that the one true God, remember Baal and Elijah and the prophets of Baal and Asherah and all these local Canaanite gods. This was originally a Canaanite occultic site, and so it became important that the one true God and his worship was taking place in that location. So there's a really important principle. There appears to be something about holy ground or a sacred precinct that is respected generation after generation. It is very common to see Greek and Roman temples built on the previous one where the local deity was. It was common for these temples to later become churches. It was common for these churches later to become synagogues. And you can see a great example of that in Istanbul if you go traveling, and you can have a look at the one of the churches, sorry, one of the mosques that used to be a church, and it's actually still got some of the same symbology of both in their really fascinating tourist location to have a look at. So this continues on and on and on. And even when the Romans try to completely destroy the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and they turn into a rubbish dump for 700 years, when the Muslims came in and established the mosque and the Dome of the Rock there, they cleared it all away. And what did they do? They built the Dome of the Rock and the Alaska Mosque on those sacred sites, because there is power and control in controlling the sacred sites as to who is the one true God, or who are the true gods. It is imperative that the defeated deity must be replaced. It cannot be left vacant. In our mindset, we just go clean away, get a bulldozer, remove it, whatever. So if we look at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, we can see that it was first a place of sacrifice, then became a temple, then was abandoned for 600 years, then became a mosque, and was left alone for a period of time. It would become a spiritual location yet again. And there's a lot of things that happen in different spiritual influences, and people connect to certain sites all the way throughout history, and even in many religions or New Age philosophies and ideas, is connecting to the same site over and over again. Why? Because there actually is spiritual power in those sites and in those locations. So Megiddo demonstrates this with temples being built upon temples for thousands upon thousands of years. As we go, we don't know exactly how many, but literally built over and over and over again. The most interesting of the temples is the round one of the high place from the Canaanite period of occupation when it was originally first built. It is the lowest of all the excavations and levels, and as a huge mound at Megiddo, archaeologists uncovered this large sacrificial altar about 9 meters under the original surface of the land. 7 steps led up to it where they were offering sacrifices, and it was clear that there were animal sacrifices going on. Now, I want to call it one of the myths of this location. And I've studied and I've researched and I've asked archaeological friends, I've asked people who've excavated at the site. And I've asked, where, did you find evidence of child sacrifice at the site? And they go, no, we've found evidence of children who were cremated at the site along with their families and other members, but there is no evidence that this was a site of child sacrifice. Now, we know that child sacrifice occurred under the Canaanite rule, but this wasn't a particular place. So you'll see this myth, and the internet just repeats things over and mistakes over and over again. So hopefully I'm going to correct you. There is nothing great going on at this site, but let me tell you, it is incorrect to say that there was child sacrifice going on, and then there was child sacrifice at other places, but then to build something about child sacrifice into Megiddo, into Armageddon, into the book of Revelation, and on it goes, is just the wrong way around understanding what the scripture is trying to teach us. So while there's evidence of child sacrifice to Baal, its god, Mot, in various locations around Canaan, there is no direct evidence that such activities happened here. Many revelation-based preachers have taken very thin evidence from here and imagined it to be part of the book of Revelation and imposed upon it something that it's not. So the gods of Canaan, Baal and Asher, were a perpetual snare for the Israelites, and they were linked to agricultural life of the land, which we've talked about a few times, that being the prosperity of the land, the rain coming from the Baal gods, and Asherah being the feminine fertility god. So these pagan gods led the Israelites into destruction and captivity. So Megiddo was also a strategic center of great importance, as we've spoken about many times. From the beginning of the second millennium BC, Megiddo was an important military center. The city was surrounded by huge stone fortifications, strengthened by earthen ramparts, and sloped in the early days that made up very, very much like even Jericho was in the early days, or Troy, for those of you who understand a little bit about Greek cities and Greek mythology. Now, Megiddo reached its peak under King Solomon in the 10th century, and he rebuilt it as a royal city and administered the northern part of the kingdom from Megiddo. The buildings of Jerusalem, Hatzor, Megiddo, and Giza are part of the centralized planning that is recounted in the Bible. And this is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised to build the house of the Lord, his own Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, Hatzor, Megiddo, and Giza, which we see in 1 Kings 9:15. These cities were the ancient toll gates of the world. This is how people, how did Solomon get so rich? Well, what you do is you whack up toll roads, and governments all around the world have figured out this is another way for them to become wealthy and tax us a little bit more, is to whack up toll roads everywhere. So, but these were in the ancient world, because they narrowed at certain points that if you wanted to do trade between Africa and Europe, or Africa and Asia, or Europe and Asia, you would normally travel through this part of the world, particularly if you want any trade with Africa. This was the way that you would get there. So it was the bottleneck of the ancient world, and if you wanted to become a world empire, you need to control this land. Solomon controlled this land. He charged tolls and business for people selling goods and traveling through this land, and he became extremely wealthy because of it. In fact, became one of the wealthiest, and potentially the wealthiest person of all humanity that we've ever seen. But who knows about that? Okay, so the chariot city, Megiddo, reached its peak under King Solomon, and as I said, these cities were the ancient toll roads. And now we move into the end days, the last days of the city of Megiddo, and then eventually we see Megiddo was destroyed in the military campaign by one of the pharaohs in 926 BC, not the time of Moses, but later pharaohs, and restored during the reign of King Ahab with the northern tribes around 874 to 852 BC, who also made a royal chariot city, and the new walls of the new city were 3.5 meters thick. So they just kept on. It was such an important city. They kept on reinforcing it over and over again, each time higher walls, bigger walls, thicker walls, in order to incorporate it. Noteworthy of these structures is several identical buildings covering most of the city, and archaeologists believe that they were administrative and possibly even stables. Based on the biblical account, the stables were first dated to the reign of King Solomon, and the as we've talked about before, the chariots were the fighter jets of their day. They could move quickly, they could strike quickly, and they were almost invincible to any soldiers who were not on horseback. Were able to do that. So it's estimated that the stables of Megiddo could house 450 horses in their chariots, and the adjacent structures around them were of very impressive quality. Megiddo continued to serve as the seat of the royal governor of Jeroboam II, the king of Israel, is attested, and seals have been found during that particular time of the different kings. Megiddo was apparently conquered and destroyed in 732 during a campaign of Tiglath-Pileser, the third king of Assyria, against the kingdom of Israel. We see that referenced in 2 Kings 15:29. So the last days of Megiddo, the Assyrians made Megiddo the royal city of the north, and it stayed there. And at the end of the 7th century, during the reign of King Josiah, they took it back in the king of Judah, and they constructed a small fortress on the top of there. And in 1609 BC, when Josiah fell, also the city was destroyed. In the days of Pharaoh Necho, the king of Egypt went up against the king of Assyria, because empires would be fighting over this. Even when Israel wasn't in control, one empire would control another one, come in and destroy it over and over again. And we see that Megiddo was taken by the king of Assyria, and after that fell into decline and eventually was completely abandoned during Persian rule around the 5th century BC. So, a lot of information for you there tonight. So, Tel Megiddo is the place of destruction. It is, what is true is that Tel Megiddo is a biblical metaphor of a spiritual battleground between Bible and life, or between one idea and another idea. Even when the world is fighting amongst themselves, this is almost like when when it was the Persians and the Assyrians and they were battling against each other, or the Egyptians and the Assyrians, or the Egyptians and the Persians, or the Greeks and the Egyptians. Everybody, even the Romans, were fighting over control of this land, which they took from the Greeks. And it's always this control. And then the one true God eventually reigns and becomes in control. So Megiddo is this symbol of chaos and spiritual warfare and battles and all of that occurring, that no matter how strong you think you can be as an individual or a country or a person, you are never stronger than the one true God. So Tel Megiddo, and what we see is it prophesied in the book of Revelation as well, is that Tel Megiddo is the place of destruction. And what it talks about is in the book of Revelation is that this is the war to end all wars, meaning we win. The believers win in the end. God wins in the end. And the serpent and the mark of the beast, they're all completely destroyed. And so God is victorious. Different places at different times, we have to battle. We always have to battle the spiritual enemy. Sometimes they appear to be in control. Sometimes they run the government. Sometimes they run business. But always the one true God is in control. So what's our lesson for today? We must build altars to the one true God. Fantastic. So, hope you've enjoyed being with us. I'm going to hang around a little bit now for anybody who wants to stay online and chat. And I see a few of you have been posting some comments, so I appreciate that. I'm going to in this recording, we'll sign off and finish in a minute. But if you want to have a chat, if you want to hang around, please do so. More than happy to answer your questions, or just leave it down below in the comments, and we'll get back to you if you've got any questions if you're viewing this at a later stage. Join us next time when we journey to the city of Beit Shan. It's a little bit further south again. City of great importance in the Old Testament, really important in some Old Testament ideas. And it was also a city of great wealth in the New Testament. So until next time, I'm Dr. Brendan Roach, And this has been a virtual tour of the Holy Land. Thank you very much. God bless you, and goodbye. Hang around if you want to chat. Hello, I'm just going into the chat feature and the chat section. So thank you for your encouraging words of support. And I see a lot of familiar names from our ACT students here. We've got Patrick, who's always in there. Good to hear from you, Patrick. And we've also got Tiboho. Sorry for the pronunciations. I'm not really great on the old African names. And Milton, I see you pop up a lot of the time as well. So very welcome. Hey, those of you who are in Kenya, Patrick and Milton, did you know that Dr. John is going to be with you guys very soon? I think in the next couple of days. So if you there's a WhatsApp group that's being put up for some of our Kenyan students. So get on, have a chat, find out Dr. Don's going to be in Nairobi and a couple of other places. Get down, have a chat with him, talk to him, meet with him. I would love to see you and be part of that. You guys got any questions? I'm here live tonight and more than happy to take a few questions for you if you've got any. Just love and appreciate your support. And I'm hoping and praying that I'll get to Africa. It looks like I might be down in Mozambique and Zambia in December. So hopefully, and of course, we can always do this and chat. And this is the first time I've done a live stream for a while. Okay, you're all looking like there's a few of you there who are watching. But you're very quiet. So if there's no questions, I'm going to head off. Let me pray for you. Lord, just praise you and we bless you and we thank you for these mighty men and women of God who are serving you in all different parts of the world. Just be with them. They know exactly what it means to be engaged in spiritual warfare. Just bless them, encourage them, and be with them. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys. See you later. Love you. And we'll see you next week when we'll be doing another virtual tour of the Holy Land. Okay, guys. Bye-bye.